Hey y'all, this is Lotus Bermudez from Houston, Texas, and I'll be demonstrating for Texas Clay Festival today. I've got this flask here that I'll be demoing for one of my forms. I've got embossed linoleum sprig molds, mostly hand-built work, except this little bit I'm going to throw on the potter's wheel. So the clay I'm using for this is from California, Laguna B Mix. It's a cone 6 is what I fired to, so that's a mid-range. I'm just cutting slabs simply, not using a slab roller, and just tossing them a little bit thinner, getting them prepped up and ready to go. There's 3 types of hand building. There's pinch, coil, and slab. So this is obviously slab, using sheets of clay to get started. I'm going to impress these pieces and emboss them in some carved linoleum that I made. And so it's a printmaking technique that's not traditionally used in ceramics, but it's a way to get an impression on the clay and also an easy way to make a series of work, being able to use it over and over again versus hand carving and each piece being individual. So my studio here, I'm working at Third Coast Clay. My husband Tino and I built this studio. We've been around for 10 years, but we've been at this location for 2. This is the member space, and what I love most about this space is all the natural light that comes through. I absolutely love the Texas Clay community, and I love being a part of the Texas Clay Festival. It's an integral part of what really keeps me motivated and going, and also pushed us to create Third Coast Clay on the scale that it is today. Building up that clay community and having that support system and being inspired by and inspiring other clay artists is a really large part of my practice and who I am just as a person. So here I'm scoring the clay, so I'm just cross-hatching and making grooves and adding a watered-down clay called slip. This is basically going to weld the pieces, the joint together. So it goes from a flat slab form into a volumetric shape. The clay needs to be the right consistency. If it's too soft, it'll distort really easily. If it's too dry, it'll crack on the bend. I reinforce the joint with a coil of clay for reinforcement. I don't do it on the top and bottom. I just use a paddle to help reinforce those joints. It was my 12th birthday when I sort of came to the realization that I was going to die one day, and that sense of mortality had me crying every day for 2 years, which I look back as really funny. I don't know how my parents put up with me, but it also gave me a deeper appreciation of living life to its fullest. And so the flask form, and a lot of people cope with their stresses and stressors and anxiety in life with drinking or over caffeinated, and so it's about a celebration of being
alive and appreciating today and appreciating the special moments in life with that sense of sort of lingering mortality kind of on the back end of that, to give you that realization of how much you're drinking. So it has the spikes on the side of the forms that you'll see later on, and in the beginning those are sort of fun to hold and touch, but as you drink more and more, it acts almost like cactus spines or spikes, and it actually kind of deter you from overindulgence. I'm such a tool geek. Like, I absolutely love different types of tools. This one is from the kitchen. It is a ravioli cutter used to create the crinkle cut texture on the forms. There's a lot of tools I hand make myself, but with the small ravioli cutter from the kitchen, I just absolutely love the texture that it creates, and also the memory of cooking in the kitchen. So here I've got the top and the bottom slabs finished for the main body of the form. Paddling the top and bottom helps to compress the slabs together. This piece was a little bit on the wet side, so I'm just gonna take out my trusty rusty torch here and dry it out. As we know, most clay artists are obsessed with fire. Here I am rolling out a coil of clay. To get it consistent, I use the whole length of my hand. I think most people would probably throw their top section separate on the wheel and then add it to it. I don't know, for some reason I find this more fun. So I center my piece on the wheel first and then add the coil and throw directly on the form. It also gives me a good indication of what it looks like as a finished product versus trying to throw 2 or 3 different tops and then mix and match. So I compressed and stacked the coils to create one uniform wall. I'm trying to throw as dry as possible so I don't ruin the design on the body of the form. So it's just a little tiny sponge with a little bit of water. I've got a chamois, just a little piece of leather to smooth out the rim. My favorite part of throwing on the wheel is the wet clay, and so I take a portion of a metal rib, just the little corner, and then I add a little wiggle to the work. It adds an organic shape, but it also adds that softness of, even after the piece is fired, of what it was like when I threw the piece. I started off as a painter before I became a ceramist, and so I think a lot about surface and form and the way that they work together. Repeatability is important to me. I'm a little bit obsessive, and so using sprig molds, I can achieve the same form in a repetitive manner that I really enjoy the process of making, but also what it looks like visually for that consistency. And so my spike and skull sprig molds are just from bisque clay. So bisque clay is work that's already been fired one time, so it's a little bit porous, and so I can push wet clay into those forms and they just come right out. Now you know you're living your best clay life when you're with a group of friends and you can use the word bisque and you didn't mean the soup at all. In general, I'm a bit of a cluttered pack rat, and so these sprig molds here were things that objects I wanted to have and collect and keep, but instead I made a sprig mold of, and so I felt comfortable not keeping items and letting them go if I can sort of have a remnant or a sprig mold of that. And so the spikes are actually from a vintage wooden juicer, and the skull was from a family trip in Dallas to their science museum. I had bought a keychain as like a 14 or 15-year-old, and so I went ahead and stopped collecting items as much and would appreciate them as sprig molds and incorporating them into my art. It's a way to kind of have a slice of life, so every time I use that mold, I think of when I experienced buying that object or came across that object, but also when I actually made the mold itself. So the skull sprig mold I made in my first fundamentals of ceramics class in college, and I've just used that one mold the entire time. I felt like potters were so resilient during the pandemic. I found myself in the studio at first crying and upset and really hard to be creative and be part of the creative process. And then as sort of the time progressed, I found a way to sort of look at it from a different perspective, So potters were successful because we can spend long times in a studio isolated by ourselves and still be just fine. I think that's part of the introverted part of being an artist. So even though I really love being part of the clay community, spending time on my individual practice and isolated, I don't have a problem with as well. But also, we're used to washing our hands 27 times a day. And so I think for a lot of people, getting to the practice of washing their hands a lot after they came back from the grocery store sort of think that wasn't an issue with clay artists. I've been working in clay for almost 28 years now, and it's just part of who I am. Like, it's in my bones and in my blood at this point. And not only do I love the making and creation process, I love sharing that passion with other people. And so education is so important for me and just integral of who I am. And so sharing and watching the light bulb go off in other clay artists and watching people progress as well with their artwork is a crucial part of my practice, and also just what I love to do every single day.
Thanks for watching. Appreciate it.